Hi, good morning. This is Francisco Hansen, and we are talking today about third-party support for SAP. In the course of talking about better SAP management, we are being asked by many clients, well, what about third-party support? Is this an option? Is this not an option? Much skepticism, much interest, especially on the cost side. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Let's get into it. We have today as a guest a real expert on this side, someone who comes from SAP in the past, but he'll tell you more about that, and today works for Spinnaker, one of the main third-party support providers for SAP. Welcome, John. How are you?
I'm very good, Francisco. Thanks for having me.
So I'm Francisco Hansen, CEO of VOQUZ Labs. Been working in the software negotiations and software asset management area for the last 15 years. Before that, in IT, general management and applications development, always confronted with SAP, using SAP many occasions, implementing SAP. And John, how about you? What have you been doing the last years?
So I've recently moved to Spinnaker Support, where I head up the sales teams across Europe, Middle East and Africa. I guess relevant to a lot of the conversation we're going to have this afternoon. I spent the previous five and a bit years at SAP looking after their renewals commercial management team, which in effect looks after their maintenance revenues across the UK and I and Northern Europe. So a lot of experience in the SAP maintenance space.
Thank you very much. Look very much forward to hear your opinions on those matters today. So what are we going to talk about today? Let's look at the agenda. So first of all, what is this? What is third-party support, and what are the differences to SAP support? Is this something for me? When is it something for me or not? Now, all clients are considering or having to consider is for HANA, how does this change the options? What are the common perceptions and worries and sorrows that you have about third-party support? Is this a final decision forever? I'm going away from SAP, or can I move back to SAP sometime? What are the perceived risks of third-party support? What do you get? What don't you get? What's the conclusion? And I'm already excusing myself for putting John under some pressure today, because I'm playing the part of the client. I'm the worried one. I'm the one who sees the advantages on the cost side. Very skeptical person in general terms. I am. So looking to see what is good, what is bad about, what do you get, what don't you get. So let's get into that. So first of all, third-party support. Just sticking to the definition now. Service offered by specialist companies such as Spinnaker, support that includes legal updates to match tax and human resources requirements, support services to resolve errors and answer questions of the client, and security vulnerability mitigation. So what is in opposite to that? The standard or extended support that SAP offers it. What can you tell us about that, John?
So yeah, in effect, Francisco, the third-party support replaces the support that the software vendor will be delivering today. So we, from a functional perspective, we'll take on the break fix, the advisory services, the regulatory updates, all those kind of things that are covered within your vendor contract today. The key thing being that we, as a third-party support provider, are not looking at cloud roadmaps. We're not looking at R&D budgets. We're not looking at funding new products. We're simply looking at support. So whilst we're able to deliver that service, we're also able to deliver some significant commercial benefits because we don't have to fund all those other activities.
Interesting. So you're saying basically you're able to offer the services at a lesser cost because you don't have to finance further development of the software. This is an important message. But I make the experience, like many clients still have difficulty understanding, well, what is support and what do I need support for? Of course, if you talk with a specialist who's using actually the support is fine, but CFO, CIO, he sees a 22% bill every year, and he doesn't quite know, what am I getting for this? Is this just me asking questions because I'm not willing to read? What is it in reality that I'm getting from SAP, or in other cases, Oracle or someone else? When I have a support contract, what is the typical support requests that clients send over to the manufacturer?
So, I mean, the typical requests we see, I mean, they vary from customer to customer, Francisco. You will have customers who have a very advanced, very mature internal team who are handling a lot of questions themselves and are coming to their support provider to deliver the real level 4 in-depth expertise that they can't have in-house. They're looking at delivering functional things such as legal upgrades, to look after your tax and regulatory upgrades, things like that, to make sure that you're compliant. Clearly, there's a large element in today's market around security and how we're keeping your system secure and protecting from external attack. There are also customers though who use the support service from Spinnaker very much as an advisory service, which is something that's maybe not as often offered by the vendors, in really looking at the how-to type question of how would I do this? What would happen if I did this? Those type of questions. So they're less break fix and something has gone wrong, can you fix it? But more, what's the art of the possible? What would happen if I did this? Is it okay to do that? Those type of questions. So it can vary from customer to customer.
Yeah, interesting. On to the next one. What are the differences as we saw them, as we knew about that? Of course, first of all, and big motivation here is price. So, I mean, software is a very, very sales-driven market. And so we get to see situations where clients over time, their requirements changed. They bought many things that they aren't using anymore. And not always they have an easy task in negotiating exchanges with the manufacturer and getting rid of the shelfware that they are actually paying support for. So anything's fine that you pay for when you use what you pay for, but in essence, many clients have a lot of shelfware, and this is an issue. And sometimes you get to solve this, sometimes you don't. Now, talking about third-party support, software updates are not in, but I need to get into these details with you. What is not in, what is in? Support services, yes, you get. Local expertise, well, of course, I mean, SAP is a monster of a company. They have support in lots of countries. Eventually, when you work with other companies for third-party support, you need to check the countries where they offer this support, especially for legal changes in taxes and human resources. What else? End of support. We are confronted right now with ECC running out of support in 2027 or 2030 if you pay 3% additional on top of that 22% for support. Audits by SAP, does this change? No, SAP will still keep auditing you. And can you buy additional things? Yes, you can, of course. We have clients on third-party support who are still on the cloud products with SAP buying additional things. But of course, when you punish SAP by not having support with them, it is unlikely that they will give you the same discount levels as they have.
Yeah.
Do you want to correct me here about the software updates, about any other things?
I think
take on this?
I wouldn't necessarily say correct you, Francisco. I think it's good to put some of these things into context. So, for example, the software update is a very valid piece. You know, officially, if you are moving away from the vendor support, and particularly from SAP support, you'll no longer be entitled to any updates to the software that they release. Now, if I'm looking at ECC 6 from SAP, there's no further updates being published for that. You know, the answer is RISE. What's the question from SAP? But so there's no from that perspective, there's no updates coming. Now, if you're a customer who is running on S4 today, third-party support is absolutely still a solution for you. And to be clear on updates, you can take an archive of all the software to which you're entitled prior to leaving vendor maintenance. And that's something that we would absolutely encourage every customer to do. They take that archive. So they may still then have access to significant updates from the version that they're currently running, but they, as long as they're available before they leave support and they download those updates and keep them in an archive, they would still have access to those updates as and when they needed them, because it's IP that they've been entitled to under their support contract. If there's anything released after they've left support, then yes, the access to that would be limited. But that's where there's further opportunity in things like the second-hand software market that's certain customers in certain jobs. And yes, some of the things that you also mentioned there, it's very clear. SAP will have the right to audit all their customers, regardless of whether they're on vendor maintenance or third-party maintenance. That's a common question I get a lot from customers looking at this: is what will happen with my SAP audits? Quite simply, nothing. They will continue as normal. And yes, there's some perception of risk around what will happen to future license purchases and future requirements. And I think we're going to cover that in a little bit more detail as we go through into some of the perceived risks in the deck. But no, I think what we've got here is a broadly correct set of statements. It's just good to put some of these in the right context at the right time.
Absolutely. And as always, you got to get down to the accuracy and the details. There is no one-size-fits-all principle when it comes to technology or things like that. That's what I'm seeing. So it is an important question. The question is, am I an innovative company always having the newest versions of software? Or in contrary to that, haven't I updated my software for the last 5 years anyway? So am I paying for updates that I'm not using? Two totally different situations, and you gotta consider this. Another thing that you said that woke me up a bit is, so support, the use of support. What do you think? I mean, how is this calculation done anyway? I mean, I can think of a client sending 10 support requests to SAP in a year, and another one sending 100. Or am I wrong there? Are they all of them more or less having the same level of usage?
No, absolutely not, Francisco. You're right there. The usage varies between customers. As we mentioned before, some of those customers have extensive internal teams. They have numerous system integrators working in their environment who are able to pick up a lot of that. Other customers don't. But also, I think your first point there is your company is absolutely happy with the functionality of ECC. We've got companies and customers today who've been running on ECC for a number of years. That platform is stable. It's performing well. So the number of break-fix tickets is minimal because they've been through those, they've corrected those, and they have a stable platform. And therefore, the type of tickets they're logging are probably smaller in number, and they're more into that advisory service type, which is the different kind of profile of customers. So it's something that we as a third-party support provider will take into account when we're looking at the commercial model we can put forward.
Yeah. So here we have some of the motivators. When should I consider third-party support? I already said, well, if you're not moving, if you're not planning even to move to S/4HANA, of course, then you won't anyway get support from SAP after 2030. So why should you stay on support? You're not getting it. Your company is in a difficult financial shape. This is something that happens. I've been there with some clients of ours who just had a big pressure to lower costs. You have already moved to S/4HANA on-premise. You're planning to do a big move anywhere in updates of software. You're considering moving to RISE with SAP 6 years from now. So what is the benefit on staying on support if you're anyway moving to subscription, right? Eventually, this is something for you. Or, as we said in the beginning, you did a not so good deal in buying software, or things changed and you have an amazing lot of shelfware, and you didn't come to an agreement to solve this now. So another thing,
and I think Francisco,
yeah,
sorry, I think it's also worth noting. I think if we'd looked at this slide maybe 5-6 years ago, we probably would have seen number 2 and number 5. And I think third-party support maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago was very much driven by a cost reduction exercise. So it was for those companies, as you say here, who are in a difficult financial shape, or companies who had not maybe expanded in the way that they thought they would, or maybe they've contracted and therefore they had exaggerated support costs due to shelfware. And that really was where third-party support came in. I think what we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years is number 1, number 3, number 4, where customers are using third-party support as a way of freeing up their roadmap, as a way of looking at how they transform and transforming on their own time frame, and transforming to the products that are right for them, and most importantly, the products that deliver business value. Like we say, if you can drive significant business value out of moving to RISE, then absolutely third-party support is probably the wrong solution for you. You should be moving to RISE. I think the market indicators would be that a number of customers cannot see significant business value in S4 or in RISE at this moment in time, and maybe certainly not enough to justify the cost of a migration. Therefore, the ability to provide freedom of choice and freedom of time frame is something that's enabled by third-party support.
And you know what? In my opinion, SAP is just not doing a good job in showing the value of moving to RISE and to S/4HANA. Anyway, I was talking the other day with a KPMG consulting specialist in US taxes, and he was telling me of really, really interesting advantages of RISE with SAP and S/4HANA on the tax side, of new functionalities that are really worth a lot for clients, and most clients aren't aware of it, and SAP is not even talking about that. So again, it comes down to the detail when you talk about those things. Let's move on. But I want to put on another question in here, and this is, when I think of conversations with CIOs in the past, very often, for instance, German secondary car industry, big manufacturer of electronic devices, and we were talking about quitting not SAP support, but support of another manufacturer. And the first question of the CIO, well, what if the system doesn't work anymore? I'm left alone. So it broke down. I can't ask SAP anymore. I'm personally responsible for my IT. So what about it? Am I left alone now that when a bug comes up, when something comes up? What is the situation there, Joe?
Absolutely not. If you've moved to a third-party support provider, if you've moved your support in that scenario to Spinnaker support, then that's where we come in. We will take on that responsibility. It's engineers, the specialists in each of the softwares, and each of the specialisms within those software, within the ERP solutions, to look after those systems. And that's what we're doing for thousands of customers across the globe. So absolutely, that's our responsibility then. That we are the insurance policy in that scenario.
Very good. So how does S/4HANA influence the options? Of course, we already talked about the persons who are not moving to S/4HANA, so there is not a big question there. If you're not getting support from SAP, you need alternatives. But even if you're moving to S/4HANA perpetual, you could convert your license, basically. I've seen this here in Mexico, in fact, companies moving to S/4HANA perpetual and then quitting SAP support. Well, not a good example, though. A very badly prepared client who just didn't assess his compliance situation with SAP before. So afterwards, not being prepared, he was charged for all the lacking, the deficit of software that he had. So you need to clear things before you get there. So RISE with SAP, this is a question that I'm leading in negotiations all the time. So I am an ECC client moving to RISE with SAP. Dear SAP sales guy, what am I getting in exchange for that? I mean, what am I getting that someone who starts from scratch on RISE with SAP isn't getting? So I've been paying maintenance for the last 30 years. I'm moving to a subscription model. What am I getting for sticking with SAP instead of someone who never paid something, who doesn't have any rights, any perpetual use rights, etc.? So, and the question is, if I'm not getting anything, eventually I want to save some money and just save some money, but not paying that much support over the next 4 to 5 years. This is a real argument, and SAP, in my opinion, needs to consider this, how to handle this situation. What are you, dear SAP, giving me for sticking with you for the next 5 years before I move to RISE, for instance? So, and the last one is the composable ERP, no SAP support. I mean, this is indirect use of SAP, something always with a composable ERP strategy that you need to manage. How important is where I am? I'm thinking legal updates, things like the tax updates, HR updates. How important is this question, John?
It's important to consider, Francisco. We at Spinnaker have customers all over the globe. So from our perspective, there is no kind of region that we cannot support and we don't support. It's something that if you are a global entity, for example, running payroll across the globe, and you've got multiple different payroll requirements. I'm thinking, you know, for example, in India, there's individual payroll requirements within each individual region. Those are the type of things that you need to look at and think, actually, how complex does that become? How important is that to my business? It's like we talked about at the start. It's about understanding the importance of this solution to your business. If that is something that is handled today by SAP in what they give you under their support, then that's maybe of significant value to you. But absolutely, if you're looking at a support model by region, there is no region that we can't take on. There's no region that third-party support can't be delivered in. You've just got to look at all those individual requirements and say, does the sum of the parts mean that the support that I'm getting justifies the cost? Does it therefore also potentially justify the fact that I'm going to be forced into a migration that I perhaps don't have the time for or don't have the expertise to do? You've got to look at all of those individual elements and say, does that, when put together, justify the cost? Does it justify the roadmap that I'm being pushed down? Does that justify the fact that I have to act now when I perhaps don't want to act now? All these things come into your decision-making process.
John, let me be very blunt here. I mean, no company covers the whole world. No SAP does even, right? And so let's say I'm in, I don't know, small country, Ecuador, Honduras, for example, and you have an IRS, a local IRS that is complicated, that is changing their reporting all the days. You don't have people, I don't know, I'm assuming you eventually don't have local people in Honduras or Ecuador.
No.
Let's assume it would be the case.
No.
How can I rely on that? I mean, is it really something feasible? You have an English-speaking consultant that has to manage now with tax issues in Ecuador. How realistic?
So we have a global team who is looking at each of those for our individual customers. So we will understand exactly what your requirements are as a customer, by region, by country, whether that's tax and regulatory updates in Honduras. And we'll understand exactly what's required for each of those customers, and we'll have the global team looking into that. And whenever there's a change, we'll be looking at who that change impacts. So if there's a change in Honduras, we know there's customers that are impacted by that, and we'll be putting together a bespoke targeted solution that meets that requirement for that customer. So yes, we don't have a team in each individual country. We have a global team that is sitting, monitoring constantly the requirements for change in relation to each individual customer. We're not doing it at a global level like a vendor would and then pushing out a patch. We're looking at an individual country-specific requirement for a customer and building a specific fix for that customer.
Do you contractually take responsibility for this?
Absolutely.
So if I'm contracting with you in Honduras and I want to make sure that I will still be able to do my tax reporting 3 years from now on the base of SAP ECC, would you contractually take responsibility for that?
Yeah, as I say, we would do all the due diligence beforehand to understand exactly what we needed. If there were any specific countries that we couldn't cover for whatever reason, we would call that out. We're yet to find them today, but you know, we would absolutely do that due diligence first, and it would be covered fully in the contract.
Very good. Cool. Going on. So can you go back to SAP support now? I mean, SAP can't be pleased if we leave SAP support. There is nothing to be explained here. And so what we've seen in innovations is that this has been a tactical move by clients. Sometimes they just were in a situation that was not really solvable. They ran into a conflict with a lot of shareware, or they had such cost pressure that they needed to make a decision now and quickly, etc. But no, it was not really strategically. And then 4 or 5 years later, what do I do now? S/4HANA is coming. I'm on third-party support since 3 years ago. Can I go back? What is your take? You have worked for SAP, John. So is this, am I leaving SAP forever? Can I go back? What, I have an opinion, but I would like to hear your opinion more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly give you my opinion, Francisco, and it's very simple. You're not leaving SAP forever. If you want to go back to SAP, there is always a road back to SAP. The analogy I use a lot with customers is if you've purchased a car, if you've purchased a BMW, you know, we're making a German car for German software. If you've purchased a BMW and you decide that you want to have that serviced by your local garage as opposed to a BMW retailer, you will be told that you're not going to get as much if you sell the car on. You're going to be told that it's going to be a lot harder to resell the car because you haven't got a dealer service history. All these things you'll be told. But ultimately, if you go back to them in 5 years' time and say, I want to buy another BMW and I want to trade this in, or I'm going to trade this in and I'm going to buy an Audi, they're not going to stop you buying a BMW. And it's the same with SAP. If you go back to SAP in a couple of years' time and say, hey, I've been away, I'm now at a point in my decision making where I want to be on Rise, or I want to be on S4 or S5 or whatever might be available at the time, then absolutely you'll be welcome back. There's always a commercial negotiation to be had. Yeah. Officially, you know, SAP will state that you will pay an element of back maintenance. Again, there's always a commercial negotiation, and I think it's also key to understand in that discussion point for a customer. If you're looking at going back in, let's say, 2032 or a time frame like that, you're making a decision now about migrating back in 7 or 8 years' time to a solution. You know, S4 was 2014. It'll be 18, 19 years old at that point. You're then at a decision point as a customer of, do I want to go back to SAP support purely and simply to be able to migrate my system to there? So I'm going to migrate a system that's probably 40 years old to a technology that's 18, 19 years old. Yeah. Or do I want to, at that point in time, stop and say, what is in the market? What is the current best practice for my industry, for my business, for my requirements? And I'm going to go and stand that up as a greenfield same customer to whoever that vendor may be. And I'm going to run 2 systems, and then I'm going to flip over when I'm ready. Rather than this approach that's driven by the vendor of migrating what you've got to their latest system. If their latest system is not the best practice, why would you migrate?
I totally agree. And I'm a person I like options. I always like options. I don't like to be forced into something. Now, I love the SAP software. I come from a phase in the development of IT when we had to develop our own ERPs, and it was horrible because not a single mid-sized company had the knowledge or manpower to do this. So I love having a software like SAP on that. But you need to look down to the details. So when does it make sense? When does it not make sense to upgrade to a new version? What is the return on investment for me, etc.? So risks of third-party support as Gartner sees them: contractual restrictions, security and GTRC requirements of global tax reporting, third-party application dependency and organizational roadmap with the software. And what is this? Contractual restrictions, believe it or not, I have seen pretendedly perpetual software contracts that had a term in them saying, well, if you cancel support, it's not perpetual anymore. Now that's illegal, really, but you would find such contracts on the market. So you make sure what you have in terms of a contract and how to deal with that. I mean, illegal terms are illegal. So in occasions, even if you have those terms, it doesn't mean you have to respect them. Security and GTRC requirements is something that we talked about, but discussing this with a third-party support provider is essential. You need to really look in what countries you are, how difficult is your GTRC environment. Third-party application dependency, well, not really seeing this as a big risk in my eyes. So the thing is, basically, you may have third-party applications that depend on a specific version of SAP. Now, if you're not updating SAP anyway, why should you be updating your third-party application? I don't quite see this.
And I think the interesting one there, and I had this conversation with a customer the other day, third-party application dependency, you could always state that you need to be on the latest version, or you need to be on N-1, whatever that may be. If you're running an ECC, I can't imagine a third-party application that mandates that you must be on S4. So if you're running on ECC, you're going to be on the latest version or have access to the latest version, so that goes away. I would say that the bottom point there, Francisco, the loss of solution manager, that's absolutely not a perceivist. That's a genuine statement. We've got to be very clear here. You will not be able, as a customer, to use solution manager. That's licensed under your SAP support agreement. Again, it's one of those things to understand: how much are you using it? What value are you getting out of it? And actually, is the cost of replacing that with another tool that a lot of customers already have similar tools running in the environment anyway. But just to be clear, that is a genuine statement. There's a lot of people in the market.
In fact, SAP is migrating to ALM right now. So even SAP customers are in the plan to migrate into ALM, the newer solution of SAP for that. So, but you have to deal with it. I have seen customers who basically forgot this part. You can run into trouble with that. And I have also seen customers who have a lot of their SAP documentation within SAP Solution Manager because they decided to do so. So you need to manage this process.
You need to look at your own individual circumstances.
Yep. What else? Let's get to the next slide. Another thing here regarding the conclusions, and always said, something for me is getting down to the details. But how about the process? How about the process of introducing third-party support? What is good? What is bad? When does it work well? When does it just go south, your project of third-party support? What should you look into, John?
So I guess from a best practice perspective, SAP is a software that touches numerous parts of an organization. So the first thing that I would always advise all my customers to do is understand who all of the stakeholders are within the organization. Who within the organization is touching SAP? If that's the finance teams, if that's the HR teams, the payroll teams, supply chain, who is that software working for? Make sure all the stakeholders involved are aware of what the decision could mean and aware of what it could do, both in terms of what they may need to go without, in terms of potential upgrades, but also in terms of what it could do in terms of cost benefits, and in terms of the ability to maybe look at other solutions in the market as opposed to being tied into the vendor. The first thing, though, is to make sure you understand as a business who all your stakeholders are, because we see too many customers who get right up to the end state of negotiating a third-party contract, and then they find 3 or 4 business stakeholders who weren't aware it was going to happen, and all of a sudden that's a very short time frame to have a conversation with, and understand with those stakeholders what is critical to them. So you might have a stakeholder who says, no, I always need to be on the latest version. Okay, well, we're not going to move to S4, so you are on the latest version. So actually, is that a real requirement, or is that just a fear of missing out? Is that a nice to have more than a real requirement? And then again, if you were given the option, would you always go through an upgrade cycle? Would you always be implementing enhancement packs and things like that are often costly? Again, understanding the value that your current support is delivering. We talked about that earlier in the piece around for example, the GTRCs, all these kind of things. How much value is the support actually giving you? And to be clear on the strategy, what are you doing? That we've talked about earlier. You know, if your strategy is ECC, if your strategy is S4, then it might be S4 on premise, although SAP will be telling you about RISE and RISE and RISE, regardless of what you sell them. They seem very loath to sell on-premise licenses at the moment. So I then asked the question, and we had a customer just yesterday who said, we're going to move to S4. And we said, well, why? What's in it for you? Why are you moving to S4? Well, because we have to, because of 2027. So, okay, well, if you didn't have to do it, would you do it? Oh, absolutely not. So understand that you have options would be my thing.
Absolutely. Options it is. So it's about understanding the options, especially if you are stuck in a situation with your contract that where you don't see the willingness to adapt to your needs. Then eventually this is the right point in time to consider this option. I like what you're saying here, ultimate support guarantee. What can you tell us about that?
So this is something that you know, we believe is completely unique in the marketplace here. You know, what Spinnaker are able to offer is our ultimate support guarantee, so that you know, you can see it on the slide here. We will deliver you a legally compliant service. There's no infringement of the intellectual property of SAP. We will, as you mentioned at the top of the call, we'll resolve all those issues with any product that's under support from us. Like you talked about the customer who says, what happens if? That's where we come in. That's where we are. We will resolve everything. We actually have a part of our guarantee that says we'll improve your system security. So we'll benchmark your security, and then we'll guarantee that we can improve that security over the term of the agreement. Security is a big thing for all of our customers, and it can be a change in religion, almost moving away from vendor patches to a more kind of targeted defense in depth method of targeting the actual weakness, targeting the actual problem, rather than waiting for a patch, which then might be deployed and cause problems elsewhere. It's a very powerful statement, we believe, to say that we can improve your security without relying on vendor patches. And all of these things, interoperability is again one that Gartner touched upon, is how if I'm investing in the latest cloud products from SAP in specific areas, will the interoperability of those products with a legacy ECC system or a legacy S4 system be maintained? Absolutely, we'll guarantee to maintain that interoperability. And all these things, as it says here, are underpinned with a guarantee that if we can't do that, we'll work with you to go back to the vendor.
This is something, by the way, that I see very heavily being underestimated today in S4HANA migrations, which is interoperability with the interfaces that you already have on your system. Some SAP systems, they interact with, I have seen it, it's not a joke, 500 different systems that were non-SAP systems. So now migrating your main system to a new main version, when you have 500 systems connected to it, it's the S4 migration is not the problem anymore. It's all that is connected to that, right? Okay, so the path. So what happens? How do people and when do people normally do that? We see here a scheme of week 1, 3, 4, 6. What is this? Tell me about that.
So for me, this is really again, it's the best practice. You know, for us,
yeah,
we can take on support tomorrow. So we have the engineers, we have all the expertise. We can take on support tomorrow. But for an SAP customer, you have the target date of the 30th of September, at which point you must notify SAP that you're going to be moving away from support the following year. So what we'd encourage customers to do is effectively have the conversation now. Make sure that we've got enough time, or you as a customer have enough time to do all those pieces we talked about, making sure that you've scoped the service fully, making sure you've got a full definition of what's in scope and out of scope. As you talked about, which countries are in scope, what's required in each country, and make sure you've got enough time to speak to the stakeholders, understand all of those things. That's something that, you know, if you're looking at September the 30th, customers really need to start doing that now and in the next couple of weeks to allow themselves the full time to go through this scope of work properly, to allow themselves to make an informed decision. You know, I'm not going to sit on this call and say that third-party support is the right answer for every single customer. It's not. There are customers out there for whom third-party support won't be the right thing. But give yourself time to go through that working to understand if it is or isn't. And if it is, make that decision before the end of September to allow yourself the time to notify SAP, have a dual running period with Spinnaker to allow us to get the onboarding experience fully correct for you, so that on the 1st of January 2024, you can leave the vendor support behind and you can migrate over to Spinnaker support. I guess the ask here is that if you come in the last week in September and say, hey, Spinnaker, John, I want to look at third-party support, absolutely, we can do it for you, but it's going to be a very, 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 very big job is to get that signed off in a week.
I agree. Coming to conclusions and summing up what we've seen, is there a high business value moving to S/4HANA now? Can you confirm that? And I really, really have an issue with clients spending today millions for migration projects and new software, etc., and not knowing what is the outcome for me. So if you're getting the outcome, if you have the return on investment, if you're using the new functionalities of RISE, of S/4HANA Perpetual, whatever, please do so and go that way. You have a clear business case. It's all about the business cases. I mean, already, I don't know, 15, almost 20 years ago, we had a big governance department in the media company where I was working, and basically no single project on top of $20,000 software development went through without a minor business case at least. But if you don't see the business value now, if you don't see the business value in the support that you're getting, if you don't see the business value in migrating to S/4HANA, then third-party support is an option. Or let me even extend this. If the proposal that you have on the table today from SAP is unacceptable, then third-party support is an option. You can't migrate to RISE with SAP or to S/4HANA at any price, under any circumstance. You need to check if it's worth for you. You need the options. You need to look into that. So now if you decide to move to third-party support, as John said, you need to really discuss this internally. You won't get to a success if you don't have consensus on the team, on the management of the company, because eventually you will get into situations you don't want to get into, in discussions about compliance with SAP that may get tough. You need the support from your management to get there. So measure your support usage, but measure also your license usage. I mean, what you can't do is being totally under licensed, moving to third-party support, and then complaining that SAP is getting back at you and saying, well, guys, I mean, we could turn our head around when you paid support, but no, you don't even pay support. So please buy the licenses that you don't have, that you're using and you didn't buy, and eventually you won't get this major discounts anymore. So prepare yourself properly to that. And this is about it, having the options, looking at the return on investment, looking at your contracts, and clearing the situation to discuss if this is an option. I love about this conversation with John the fact that he comes from SAP support, that he knows exactly what he's been talking about, what support is, what customers use on that or not, and that he has like the clear, the cool head and cold head to look into things from a different perspective. Like, I'm not, for heaven's sake, trying to sell it for you at any cost. I'm just giving you an option. Consider this option as something you can do and analyze it pragmatically as we like to do things. Just don't get forced by anyone into any decision, right?
Exactly, Francisco. You know, I think what I'd like customers to take away from this is to say, I do have options. You know, if I talk to SAP, the answer is right, regardless of what my question is. Actually, I want to know that I've got options of staying on ECC. I've got options of moving to S4, but moving in 7 or 8 years' time, as you mentioned, a contract conversion and then move later on. I've got options of staying on ECC and putting it onto a hyperscaler if I want an element of cloud functionality. I've got all of these options, and the majority of those are enabled by third-party support. So I'm more than happy to have the conversation with any customer who's looking at those options, and that's it. It's not going to be right for everybody, but I think it's going to be right for a large proportion of the customers out there who are looking at some of those business impact statements that you mentioned before.
Thank you very much, John. We are a bit running out of time, so we'll get now to the Q&A session, where every one of you can just ask further questions or insecurities you have about third-party support. Are you planning on getting there? What would you like to know? We are here for you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all for participating. We have some questions here, and I want to ask John to help me on this, please. Hi, John.
Hi.
John, we have a question here about the support for S/4HANA on-premise. The question is, do you know if SAP will continue to support SAP S/4HANA for on-premise customers beyond 2027?
Yeah. So if you've moved off ECC, then I think the official published support date is 2040 for S4. It's only the ECC or Business Suite licenses where you have 2027 and 2030 is the end date. So.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, perfect. And I see 2 more questions that are a little more complicated pending. We will come back to these 2 questions individually. If you have further questions, please contact us via labs@voquslabs.com, and we will respond individually. Okay. Other than that, thank you all for joining. It was a pleasure having all of you. Thank you. Thank you, John. Have a great day.